Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I am Dr. Supradip Das, Assistant Professor at the Department of Design, IIT Guwahati, and this is Lecture 11 of this course, Introduction to Toy Design. In the previous lecture, we tried to understand theories of play. Today's lecture brings together many different ways of understanding play. We will begin by exploring how play changes with age and how children move through different social forms of play as they grow. Next, we will examine major categories of play and what each contributes to. We will also look at how play is shaped by culture and how different categories value or restrict different forms of play. After that, we will introduce two design frameworks, the scales of play and the play pyramid, that help us analyze toys not by age or market category, but by the kind of experience they afford. By the end of today's lecture, you should have a much richer vocabulary for thinking about play. You should understand how play evolves across childhood and why these changes matter for design. You should be able to recognize different categories of play and see how a single toy often supports several at once. And finally, you should be able to use tools like the scales of play and the play pyramid to analyze and generate toy concepts intentionally. These frameworks are not just academic, they are practical lens that will guide you future design decisions. Play does not stay the same as child grow, and that's because children themselves are changing. In infancy, play is largely sensory and exploratory. An infant may simply stare at light, mouth an object, or enjoy repetitive sounds. The goal here is not mastery, but sensation and familiarity. As children move into toddlerhood, play becomes more action oriented. They want to push, pull, stack, drop, and repeat actions again and again. This is how they begin understanding cause and effect. What happens when I do this? By the preschool years, play shifts dramatically. Children start using imagination, pretending, negotiating roles, and involving others. A block is no longer just something to stack, it becomes a car, a phone, or a character. Children grow older. Play often becomes more structured. Games with rules, turn taking, strategy, and fairness become appealing. The pleasure now comes from challenge, mastery, and shared systems. But these stages are not rigid. An older child might still enjoy sensory play when they are tired or overstimulated. A preschooler might switch between imaginative play and rule based play in the same afternoon. Context and temperament matter. Mood, environment, and social setting all influence what kind of play feels satisfying in that moment. A toy that feels exciting at age 3 may feel boring or babyish at 6 if it offers no new challenge. In that very early months of life, we see unoccupied play. At first glance, these may not even look like play at all. The baby seems to be moving arms, legs, fingers, sometimes without any obvious purpose. But this stage is extremely important. These small movements are how infants begin discovering that they have a body, that they can move, and that movement produces sensation. There is no toy involved yet, no object, no clear goal. The play is entirely about self-exploration. A baby may wave their arms, kick their legs, or stare at their hands. Through this, the nervous system is beginning to organize itself. For designers, this reminds us that earliest form of play does not need stimulation or instruction. What matters is safety, comfort, and freedom of movement. This also shows us that play begins before imagination and before social interaction. It begins simply with movement and sensation. As children grow a little older, between the age of 3 to 18 months, they enter what we call solitary play. Here, the child plays alone, even if other children are present nearby. You may notice a toddler completely absorbed in stacking cups, shaking rattles, or turning blocks in their hands. They are not trying to communicate yet. They are exploring objects, sounds, textures, and cause and effect. This is focused learning. Solitary play allows children to build concentration, independence, and confidence. For example, a toddler might repeatedly drop a spoon just to watch it fall. This repetition is how they learn how the world works. For designers, this stage is critical. Toys here must be safe, simple, robust, and inviting to repeated handling. Importantly, solitary play continues across life. Even older children and adults sometimes seek quiet, solitary play to regulate emotions or think deeply. So, solitary play is not something children outgrow. It remains an important form of engagement throughout development. Next, we come to onlooker play, which is a fascinating transitional stage. Here, the child, now a toddler, does not actively join play, but watches others very carefully. They may ask questions, point, or comment, but they do not yet participate. This is learning through observation. The child is studying rules, roles, language, and social behavior from a distance. For example, a child may watch others play with blocks and slowly understand how towers are built. Later, they will try it themselves. For designers, this stage reminds us that toys and play environments communicate information even when children are not touching them. Onlooker play progresses to parallel play but also occurs in predominantly toddlers. Here, children play besides each other but not yet together. Each child has their own toys, their own activity, and their own goals. You may see two toddlers sitting side by side, both building with blocks, but not interacting directly. They are aware of each other, but not coordinating. This stage is crucial for learning boundaries, ownership, and proximity. Children begin to understand ideas like mine, yours, and personal space. At the same time, they start noticing what other children are doing. Limitation begins to appear. For designers, parallel play suggests that toys should work well in shared spaces without forcing interaction. For example, sand play tools, blocks, or drawing materials allow children to play independently but alongside peers. This stage lays the foundation for later cooperation. Before children can play together, they must first learn to play near each other. Parallel play teaches comfort with social presence without social pressure. Parallel play progresses to associative play between the ages of 3 to 4 years. This makes a big shift in social engagement. Now children begin interacting, talking, sharing materials, and loosely coordinating activities. They may be drawing together, trading toys, or building side by side while commenting on each other's work. However, there are still no fixed rules or structured rules. This play is fluid and informal. Children may all be playing with cars, but each child has their own story. This stage is where language develops rapidly. Children practice negotiation, turn taking, and simple problem solving. For designers, associative play highlights the importance of toys that can be shared easily. Associative play builds the social bridge between independence and cooperation. It is where social play truly begins to take shape. Around the age of 3 years, children start to actively cooperate and coordinate with others. They share goals, follow simple rules, and negotiate roles. This is social play. This is where friendships begin to form through play. Children learn fairness, empathy, compromise, and conflict resolution. For example, in a simple game, children may decide who goes first, who leads, and what the rules are. They begin learning that play depends on shared agreement. This stage is essential preparation for adult social life. Workplaces, families, and communities all rely on similar skills. For designers, this highlights the importance of toys that support interaction. Importantly, social play teaches values, not just skills. Children learn what is acceptable, what is fair, and how to belong. Motor or physical play focuses on movement, energy, and the body in action. Running, jumping, climbing, chasing, throwing, and balancing all fall into this category. This form of play builds strength, coordination, endurance, and spatial awareness. It also supports emotional regulation by releasing energy and stress. Games like tag, hide and seek, and ball games combine movements with social rules. Children learn both physical control and social control together. For designers, this reminds us that not all toys are tabletop objects. Slides, swings, balance, boards, ride-ons, and sports toys are all design interventions in physical play. This stage is also where risk becomes important. Designers must balance challenge with safety. Physical play teaches children what their bodies can do and where their limits are. Constructive play is where children begin making things. They stack, build, assemble, draw, shape, and design. This starts very early with simple actions like putting objects in the mouth or banging them together. Over time, it becomes building towers, making houses, drawing pictures, and creating patterns. Here, children are learning planning, sequencing, spatial reasoning, and persistence. They try, fail, adjust, and try again. A key feature is pride. When children complete something they made themselves, confidence grows. Constructive play supports both creativity and logic. It bridges imagination and engineering. Constructive play is where thinking becomes visible in form. Expressive play focuses on emotion, feeling, and self expression. Here, children use materials to show what they feel, imagine, or experience. Drawing, painting, clay, music, rhythm, movement, and sensory materials all support expressive play. There is no right or wrong outcome. For example, a child may draw angry lines, soft shapes, or bright colors, depending on mood. This becomes a language beyond words. Expressive play is especially important for children who struggle to verbalize emotions. It allows safe emotional release and regulation. Expressive toys should invent freedom, not correction. They should encourage exploration, not evaluation. This category reminds us that toys are also emotional tools, not only cognitive ones. In fantasy play, children step beyond reality. They become doctor, teacher, superheroes, animals, or imaginary characters. Here, children explore roles, identities, fears, and desires in symbolic form. They practice being someone else. A child pretending to be a doctor may be working through fear of hospitals. Another pretending to be parent may be understanding caregiving. Fantasy play supports imagination, language, empathy, and moral sensing and moral reasoning. It is also where cultural narratives are transmitted. For designers, this stage highlights the importance of representation. Characters, costumes, miniature, and role play sets shape how children imagine the world. Fantasy toys carry powerful messages about gender, profession, power, and identity. So, design choices here are never neutral. Fantasy play shows us how children make sense of reality by reshaping it. Finally, cooperative play represents the most organized social form of play. Here, children play with shared goals, agreed rules, and coordinated roles. This is where games with rules emerge strongly. Sports, team games, board games, and structured role play belong here. Children learn leadership, teamwork, negotiation, and fairness. They also learn how to handle winning and losing. For example, in team sport or board games, children must wait their turn, follow rules, and respect outcomes. These are essential life skills. For designers, cooperative play is where systems matter. Rules, turn-taking mechanisms, scoring, and balance become design challenge. This stage also shows how toys can create communities. Groups form around shared games, and shared identities. Cooperative play is where play becomes social structure and where play begins to resemble adult systems. There are other ways, of course, to classify play. For example, play is valued differently across cultures. Some cultures see play as frivolous or distracting. Others tolerate it but do not actively encourage it. Some actively cultivate play as essential learning. These views shape how children are allowed to play. They also shape adult involvement. Gaskins, Haight, and Lancy describes play in cultures where it is tolerated but not actively valued as culturally curtailed play. In this context, play is allowed, but it is seen as having limited importance compared to work, responsibility, or learning practical skills. Certain kinds of play may even be discouraged. For example, in Gaskin's study of Mayan communities in the Yucatan, pretend play involving fantasy or fictional characters was viewed negatively, not as imagination, but as telling lies. This does not mean children in these cultures do not play. They do, but play tends to stay close to real life activities and practical imitation rather than fantasy or symbolic transformation. This reminds us that not all cultures value imaginative or pretend play in the same way. A toy that celebrates fantasy in one culture context may feel inappropriate or unnecessary in another. In cultures where play is culturally accepted, parents accept children to play, but they do not actively promote or participate in it. Play is seen as something children do not occupy themselves, useful but not especially important. Adults generally do not intervene, guide, or structure play. As a result, children spend more time playing with peers rather than adults. They often play in everyday spaces rather than specially designed play areas. Instead of manufactured toys, children use naturally available objects, sticks, stones, containers, or household items. Play in these contexts is specially unsupervised and self-organized. For designers, this highlights that play does not require specialized products or adult direction to thrive. It also raises important questions about access, environment, and material culture when designing toys for diverse settings. In culturally cultivated play, play is seen as central to childhood. This view is common in urban, middle class, Euro American, and Taiwanese families. Here, play is often described as the child's work, a serious and necessary activity for development. Parents actively encourage play and frequently participate in it. Children may also spend time with professional caregivers, teachers, or therapists who see facilitating play as part of their role. However, the way adults participate varies across cultures. Research shows that Euro American parents often emphasize independence and child led play. In contrast, Taiwanese mothers were found to direct play more closely, focusing on socially appropriate behavior rather than autonomy. For designers, this category highlights how adults' expectations shape play experiences. Toys designed for cultivated play often assume adult involvement, instructions, learning goals, and guided interactions. So far, in this lecture, we have spoken about how play changes with age, development, and social context. That perspective is extremely important, but as designers, we often need another kind of lens. Instead of only asking when children play in certain ways, we also ask how toys afford play. This next slide introduces the idea of scales of play. Instead of asking whether something is or is not a certain types of play, this framework asks whether does a play experience sit along different continua. Each horizontal bar represents a scale, not a binary. A single toy, activity, or play experience can move along these scales, depending on how it is designed, how it is used, who is playing, and in what context. Let's talk through each scale. The first scale looks at level of involvement. On one end, we have passive experiences where the child mainly observes, like watching a screen. On the other end, we have highly active play, running, kicking, climbing, or physically manipulating objects. Most play experiences fall somewhere in between. A board game may be mentally active but physically passive. A puzzle may require intense focus but minimal movement. The second scale maps how social a play experience is. Solitary play involves playing alone, even if others are nearby. Parallel play happens when children play side by side with similar material but without interaction. Associative play includes sharing materials and conversation, but with loose structure. At the far end, cooperative or competitive play involves shared goals, rules, and outcomes. Interestingly, the same toy can move along this scale. For example, blocks can be solitary, parallel, or deeply collaborative. Designers should think about whether a toy allows movement along the social spectrum or locks play into one mode. This next scale looks at how constrained the play is. Free play offers high freedom. Few rules, flexible meaning, open outcomes. Strict rule play involves clear rules, goals, and constraints, like board games or sports. Neither is better. Free play supports imagination and autonomy. Rule-based play supports structure, fairness, and self-regulation. Designers influence this scale through instructions, affordances, win or loss conditions, and how easily rules can be modified. The engagement scale looks at where the main effort lies. Some play is primarily mental, such as puzzles, logic games, strategy-based play. Some play is primarily physical, like climbing, running, balancing, and many experiences combine both. For example, a maze puzzle is mentally demanding but physically subtle. A playground structure requires physical effort but also planning and risk assessment. And finally, this last scale is not about biology, it reflects social perception. Historically, many toys have been gender coded through color, themes, marketing, and narratives. These coding influences who feels invited to play. Importantly, the scale reminds us that gender association is designed not inherent. The play pyramid is another way through which designers can classify toys. Kudrowitz and Wallace proposed a framework not based on age or milestones, but based on play experience itself. Their goal was very practical: to help designers communicate, analyze, and ideate toy concepts more clearly. This framework treats play not as a developmental stage, but as a set of experiential dimensions that any toy can afford. What kind of play does this toy primarily invite? Where does its play value come from? And how might we shift it to create new experiences? This leads us to the idea of the play pyramid, a design tool rather than a psychological theory. It does not explain children, it helps designers think about toys. The play pyramid proposes that most toy experiences can be understood through four core types of play. These are not developmental stages, and they are not personality types. They are simply four primary sources of play value that designers can intentionally design for. The four categories are serious play, fantasy play, construction play, and challenge play. The pyramid structure allows designers to place a toy concept somewhere in this space. Let us understand how. The first sensory play is about entertaining the senses. Here, the pleasure of play comes directly from how something feels, sound, looks, or moves. Think of squeezing a soft stress ball, something like this, shaking a maraca, watching a kaleidoscope change colors, or splashing water in a tub. In all these cases, the child is not trying to build something, pretend something, or win something. They are simply enjoying sensory feedback. Design-wise, this type of play relies heavily on materials, texture, sound design, movement, and visual dynamics. It is especially prominent in early childhood, but it does not disappear with age. Adults still enjoy tactile gadgets, fidget toys, and visual toys. For designers, sensory play reminds us that play does not always need narrative or goals. Sometimes well-designed sensation is enough to sustain engagement. Fantasy play is about entering a world beyond ordinary life. Here, the toy becomes a prop for imagination, role play, and storytelling. When a child plays house, becomes a doctor, talks through a doll, or turns a cardboard box into a spaceship, they are engaging in fantasy play. The pleasure does not come from the object itself, but from the world the object allows them to enter. Designing for fantasy involves characters, symbolism, narrative cues, and recognizable roles. This is why dolls, action figures, playsets, and costume-based toys often sit strongly in this category. For designers, fantasy play highlights the importance of identity, story, and cultural meaning. A toy does not only afford action, it affords being someone, somewhere, or something else. Construction play is about creating something that did not exist before. The joy comes not from pretending or sensing, but from making, assembling, and transforming. Thinking of building with blocks, stringing beads into necklace, doodling freely, or assembling at open-ended construction set. What matters here is not the final product, but the purpose of creating. Designing for construction play means designing systems rather than outcomes. Loose parts, modularity, reversibility, and open-endedness become crucial. This category is especially powerful for creativity, problem solving, and agency. It allows children to experience themselves as makers, not just users. Challenge play is about testing oneself against a problem, a task, or another player. Here, the pleasure comes from effort, mastery, and achievement. This includes puzzles, board games, riddles, catching a ball, balancing, or solving logic problems. Unlike sensory or fantasy play, challenge play is structured around difficulty and progression. There is often a clear problem to solve, a rule system to follow, and a sense of success or failure. Designing for challenge involves careful calibration. Too easy and the toy becomes boring. Too hard and it becomes frustrating. Challenge play is where play meets learning without turning into formal instruction. Let us try to fit a toy into this play pyramid. This simple pull-along character toy, for example. When we place this toy inside the play pyramid, we immediately see that it does not belong to just one region. Instead, it sits across three core play experiences: challenge, fantasy, and sensory. The strongest element here is challenge play. For a young child who is just learning to walk, pulling a toy while maintaining balance is a real challenge. The child must coordinate walking, holding the string, and keeping the toy moving in the right direction. This repeated effort adjustment is exactly what challenge play represents, practicing mastery through manageable difficulty. At the same time, this toy clearly invites fantasy play. Because the toy has a character form, it becomes a companion. Children often imagine it as a pet or a friend that is following them. They talk to it, name it, or treat it as a living being. Here, imagination and symbolic meaning enter the play. There is also a strong sensory layer present: the rolling motion, the sound of wheels, the visual wobble, and sometimes moving parts provide continuous sensory feedback. This sensory stimulation keeps the child engaged and reinforces the joy of movement. So this toy sits mainly between challenge, fantasy, and sensory in the pyramid. This shows how even a very simple early toy can combine multiple play experiences without becoming complex. Now let us look at a Hot Wheels track system. This toy sits very clearly in construction play. Children spend a large part of their time assembling tracks, connectors, loops, and supports. They design layouts, test stability, and rebuild again and again. The building process itself is central to the play experience. At the same time, this toy strongly belongs to challenge play. Children test whether the car will complete the loop, reach the finish, or crash midway. They adjust height, slope, and alignment. After each failure, this repeated cycle of testing and improving is classic challenge play, practicing mastery through trial and error. There is also a clear fantasy component. Children imagine races, championship, crashes, rescues, or entire racing world. Cars become characters and tracks become cities or arenas. Finally, there is a supporting sensory layer. The sound of wheels, the clicking of tracks, and the visual speed of motion add excitement and sustain engagement. Here, the toy sits closest to construction and challenge, with fantasy and sensory enriching the experience rather than defining it. Let us now look at the toy that sits almost entirely within sensory play. The fidget cube with textured and moving surfaces. The child shakes it, presses it, flips it, and watches how it responds. Here, the dominant experience is clearly sensory. The toy is designed to stimulate touch, pressure, temperature, movement, and sometimes sound. There is no problem to solve. There is no structure to build. There is no goal to achieve. The pleasure comes directly from sensation itself, from how the toy feels in the hand, how it deforms, how it moves, or how it sounds. Play pyramid case study. Notice what is almost absent. There is very little challenge. The toy does not demand mastery or skill progression. This is close to a pure sensory experience. So toys may belong to only one category or multiple categories. The pyramid structure allows designers to place a toy concept somewhere in this space, closer to one vertex if it is strongly emphasizes one type, or somewhere in between if it blends experiences. The tool becomes especially powerful during ideation. By deliberately shifting a toy inside the pyramid, we can imagine new versions, new audiences, and new play possibilities. As we close this lecture, I want to return to a simple but powerful idea. Play is not one thing. It is not a single activity, a single age, or a single category. Play shifts across development. It shifts across culture. It shifts across contexts, mood, and social setting. And almost importantly for us as designers, play shifts based on how we design. A small challenge in material can shift a toy towards sensory play. A new rule can turn free play into challenge play. A character can transform construction into fantasy. This means that toys are not neutral objects. They are invitations to particular experiences, emotions, relationships, and ways of thinking. As we move forward in this course, I encourage you to use play frameworks not as constraints but as lenses and as ways of noticing what is happening beneath the surface of play. See you in the next lecture. Till then, have fun through play.